Hello, everyone. Welcome to the March edition of TimeZest Office Hours. I'm Seth, VP of Operations here at TimeZest, and I'm pleased to bits to have you all joining us today. If you're attending this webinar, you'll likely already know how important efficient scheduling is, not just for your team, but also for the clients you serve. Yet, even with a dead simple tool like TimeZest, we recognize that adopting new processes can sometimes meet resistance from your team. And if you've ever managed a team, you know that this is not a phenomenon unique to TimeZest. Whether it's concerns about losing control of their day, feelings of being overworked, or simply hesitation around change, these barriers can hold your team back from fully experiencing the benefits of new solutions. And I definitely get it. Once upon a time, I was a support tech. And when someone who never spoke with clients came and told me how to manage my interactions with clients, I'd roll my eyes and go back to doing what I was doing the way I was doing it. I was getting flawless NPS scores and all of my reviews were fantastic. So why wouldn't I believe that I knew better than my boss? But in the fullness of time, I realized I was a arrogant little punk and probably should have listened to the people who actually knew what was going on. That's why we've picked this topic for March, to openly address these common challenges and provide you with practical, actionable strategies to move past them. If your team is underutilizing TimeZest or some other solution, or even just flatly refusing to, this webinar is for you. You're in the right place. Joining me today is Professor Emeritus Johannah Strobaugh, who many of you already know as our resident expert and explainer of things. Johannah has literally helped hundreds of MSPs overcome this exact issue. And she has some great insights and valuable tips that will help your team embrace TimeZest more effectively. And of course, getting to streamlining the scheduling process like you actually want to. So we're going to have a conversation today about this. As always, we're here for any question, not just around team resistance to adoption. So if you have any TimeZest questions, anything about scheduling that you want to talk about, or just anything at all you want to talk about, we'll be happy to chat about it at the end. So we're going to start with this topic and then move into questions. So feel free to put those in the chat in the Q&A section as we go. But without further ado, I'll hand things over to Johannah to dive right in. Johannah, take it away.
Well, thank you for that. Yeah. This is absolutely like the number one thing that I like to bring up with customers is how are you gonna work TimeZest, how are you gonna onboard your team? How are you gonna work it into your processes? And because it is a real pain point, right? So the biggest struggle is the human condition. I think Craig's probably heard me say that a million times at this point, but it really is the resistance for change, the thought process of it's working how I'm doing it. And building new habits is hard. So we all are in that place with our work where we have our own habits and routines and things that we do that, our processes. And so kind of throwing a spoon into that blender and saying, hey, we want you to redo everything you do, can really meet some resistance. And it's not just a rethink or redo the way you do things, but rethink the way you do things, right? It's changing the thought process around, is this productive time use of my time? Is this giving the customer the best experience? And so this has actually been, from my role in trying to get customers to really onboard TimeZest and make it a part of their processes has been the biggest struggle. And the biggest reason why people end up leaving TimeZest is because they just do not get adoption where it needs to be. And so I actually encourage you guys who are attending this, if you have insights that what has worked for you or what you're specifically having struggles with, put that in the chat or in the Q&A. I want to hear from you, like what's worked, what isn't working, and let's talk through that. This is, an open dialogue. We like to keep these sessions short. It's scheduled for an hour. I generally tend to shoot for 20 to 30 minutes. but let's kind of talk about this. So I do have some articles that Craig's going to put in the chat for you guys. If you've worked with me, you know that I throw them out like candy at a parade. And so I want to make sure you all have reference material to look at later. And then I'm here to help you guys. So we'll give you the chat support email as well. You can always reach out there and get in contact with me to hold a session if you want to talk about this more one-on-one. But understanding this resistance is kind of a good place to start, knowing that it's an issue and taking it head on, right? So we know that we need to fix scheduling within our team. That ping pong is what we describe. And at the beginning of the webinar, Seth was mentioning like trying to make a visual of that, right? So this ping pong of reaching to out to the customer. And I've had my own experience of that where I've had them call me and then say, hey, we're going to send you an email. And then I get an email that says, hey, call us back. And then I call back and I sit on hold while I'm waiting to be transferred to the right person. All that while, as the customer, I'm sitting there going, I have so much to do, this back and forth, and not knowing if this is when we're going to address it or if I'm going to have to schedule time to address it later. That is not a great experience, right? So we're trying to eliminate that. We're trying to get your text back on task, onto the next thing, and not have to worry about trying to align schedules, right? So that, is the goal, right? Good customer experience, text doing what they need to be doing, not fluff.
And not to mention the disappearance of several entries on their timesheets of 15 minutes following up with the client, 15 minutes following up with the client.
Yeah.
Over. Okay.
Well, we can reduce that down to like 3 clicks, really. So one of the things here is, knowing that we need to set up our appointment types to support our team, especially as they're getting used to it, but long-term as well. Burnout is a real thing, right? So if you're just going one to the next, great for the business. Is it great overall for the customer experience if everything is scheduled back to back? Because sometimes things do run a little long, right? I know as an employee, I like to go get a cup of coffee between my meetings, right? I need to reset my brain for the next conversation, for the next task. So having some buffer in between your meetings is important to give your techs that wiggle room for submitting notes to their tickets. If something runs a little long and they're trying to wrap up a call with an extra chatty customer, or if they need to take a break to go get a cup of coffee to reset for the next conversation, right? So a little bit of buffer in between your meetings is important. And so I encourage you to go in and do that. I can share my screen and kind of show you where this is at if you haven't explored this previously. So I like to make sure everybody is on the same page here. So we should be looking at TimeZest here. I've gone into the appointment types tab. You can see all our glorious appointment types laid out here. The one I'm going to open up here is this phone call. And this is in our classic configuration. If you go to scheduling options, these are the primary features that we want to make sure are enabled to set our techs up for success or our resources, right? So the things that we need to look for is this minimum notice here. So how soon is the customer scheduling a meeting, right? And this is going to be really specific to the type of meeting that it is. If it's a remote access, maybe it's not for the next business day, but it's for maybe 1 business hour, where the tech needs time to see that it's on their calendar, but also prepare for it, right? But then when you do maybe a QBR, you're going to need to push that out, right? So being really intentional about what kind of meeting you're setting up and what it needs to be successful. This scheduling window is how far out they can schedule. So, you probably don't want to provide open-ended availability if it's something that really should be handled within the next couple business days, right? So being able to kind of control that. These buffers here, this is what I was talking about earlier. That's that free space between your meetings to really give your techs that wiggle room and that freedom to make sure they're prepared from one call to a next. We do have this right buffer time onto the calendar, which I keep saying new, but it's actually been around about a year now. And this is great to secure things like travel time, right? So if you say, okay, this appointment type uses a 30-minute travel time, you can write that buffer onto the calendar. Also great if you have an appointment type that is needing more prep time, right? You can secure that prep time on the calendar and make sure that that is not overridden by anything else, right? Also, this appointments per day is a good one. So if you know that only, you have a project going on is where I've seen this happen. And you want to make sure that only 2 of this specific appointment type are showing up on each text calendar, you can designate, hey, they only get 2 of these per day, right? Helps with the load balance and keeping things where it needs to be. So those are the main features within your appointment type to really support your techs in being prepared for the calls. But other things, yeah, go ahead, Seth.
And I'd point out too, right? It is important to keep in mind the diversity of appointment types, right? So
Yep,
use the right appointment type for the right situation, right? So just
yep,
because you got one, that you kind of use at the service desk, that you want to, have like a minimum notice of 1 hour, you might also, like as a service manager, want to put, in your signature, for example, a link to be able to meet. That appointment type, you might want to give yourself more than 1 hour. 1 hour might not be enough. You might sometimes find yourself on the road and stuff like that. So if you want to have a more open-ended appointment type, push that back 4 hours one day, whatever you need to be to get comfortable. But if it's something that's more critical and you want to make sure they have maximum availability, you can also have appointment type for that as well. So oftentimes most of those concerns do kind of come down to, do you have the right appointment type set up, and are you using them, in the right context?
yeah, absolutely. To build off of that, I have customers that will set up, they'll have 2 different remote access appointment types, just as an example, but one is for the next business day. So it's things that are not as high of priority. Maybe they're medium or low priority. So it pushes them out in the schedule so that higher priority things can be scheduled for same day. And they do things like reduce down the minimum notice, reduce down the buffers to make sure that they can get in within the same day. Obviously, if the computer is on fire, the whole network is down, we're not sending a TimeZest. We're addressing that right away. We're not sending them an email if they can't get emails, right? So I say that, but I have run into that over the years. So um, just something to keep in mind. You can build your appointment types and have that variety to support your priority levels. And so not just it's a Teams meeting versus a remote session versus a QBR, right? So you can use it to support your SLAs. Um, Something, in this, we've talked a little bit about the functionality of like setting up your appointment type to support your team, but a lot of this is the mentality, right? So really working with your team to stress the customer centric experience and making sure that your customer experience is the goal, right? Not just I have this endless list of tasks that I need to check off, but also keeping in mind, like we're providing a consistent experience. And this frees me up to take care of these other things and not have to worry about following up so much. So um, the other thing is that I've seen is, this lack of control. We talked about that a little bit with the minimum notice and the buffers where they feel like, oh, I have all this automated scheduling taking place on my calendar now. I've lost control of when things are going to come onto my calendar. So by default, TimeZest respects your PSA calendar, right? But we have set it up to give you the power to give your techs the control of their shift a little bit more in regards to what TimeZest is scheduling. So if you go to security and permissions, we have this custom user availability here. You're able to toggle this on if you want your techs to be able to go into their own TimeZest application and have the ability to set a custom shift that TimeZest uses. So they're still working their 8 to 5 or whatever it is, right? But then they can come in and say, okay, Mondays, I have a really heavy, email load. I need to go through all of my tickets and prioritize, and they can come in and shrink that down. Now, that's not just for text, but that's also your sales team, account management projects. They can come in and designate I need an hour at the end of the day to make sure that I'm getting all my notes put in and that everything is cleaned up for the day, or 30 minutes, whatever it may be, right? So you can turn that on for them to control that, or you can, if you leave this where they don't have control, you yourself as an administrator can go into users and go to configure and availability. And then you'll see by default, it'll actually be selected to use the office hours selected for that user. But if you want to establish this for them, you can come in and designate what that custom schedule looks like to best support them in their workload. Okay.
And sometimes, right, giving control over to each individual employee can be tricky, right? It's like the idea
Yeah.
is they're like, well, what if they just kind of set themselves away at all times? Well, certainly, right, that's a concern. But in this scenario versus just the traditional scenario, you're seeing them do that, right?
Yeah.
You can see that they've only made themselves available for appointments 3 hours a week or something like that. Then we can have a conversation about that. Whereas before, they might have actually just been doing that anyway, right?
Yeah.
By just suggesting those times, and so then you don't actually have any availability. That they tend to be doing that just by the virtue of the times they select to sort of manually throw out there to meet. So, yeah, tricky, right, to give them their own control, but that's sometimes giving someone enough rope to hang themselves to a certain degree.
Yeah, and you can see, it's a great point, Seth. You can see as an administrator what they've set as their custom availability will show up just like you see here for every user that has it set up. So you do have the visibility in that to see what's going on. Other things, we want to talk about, I'm going to stop sharing my screen here, is thinking about where does TimeZest fit into their processes, right? We don't want to, like I mentioned earlier, just throw a spoon into their blender and just be like, your whole process has been changed. You no longer do what you've done for the last 5 years. Now just change it. We're not trying to do that, right? We're supporting you where your pain points are, and we're providing that frictionless scheduling, right? So here's an example. We evaluate your process today, right? So if if you have a new ticket come in, your dispatcher triages it and sends it to the tech to then call the customer. Great, that's your process today. If you still want that first touch to be a phone call, okay. Some companies do, some don't. But your tech can still call, and then when they reach the customer, if they have time to address it, fantastic. If they don't, they can use TimeZest to schedule on the phone with them, right? If they are like, oh, I don't have time to deal with this right now, then they can send TimeZest through the pod, which will trigger the email and automatically follow up with them. And the tech has done their due diligence, right? They've reached out, they've called, they've left a voicemail, then they send TimeZest to follow up with them, right? And then they wash their hands and move on to the next ticket. Other things where you think about, okay, well, I actually had a great example of this. I had a conversation yesterday with a new customer. He's done some great work trying to incentivize his team to use TimeZest. He put in a competition of like whoever uses it the most in the next 10 days, I want to see. And then he's expanding that out. So yeah, use incentivize, make it a goal for them to try to reach of using it and seeing how it works. Give them a voice in it as well. But another thing that he mentioned is he was having a real hard issue with scope creep when his techs were on site. So they were going on site and the customer, oh, while you're here, right? And they were like, well, you have to, and it was this struggle of trying to please the customer, but also like, you need to submit a new ticket. So what he did is he has them using a shareable URL, which creates a new ticket and schedules it, tied to our team scheduling, which is the auto dispatching functionality, right? And he turned it into a QR code that goes on the back of their, what is it called? It's like their name tag that they
Yeah, a
wear.
little like a
Oh,
lanyard.
lanyard, right?
Lanyard, yeah.
Yep. So when the customer tries to scope creep on an on-site, they just say, hey, scan this and submit a new ticket for that, right? And then that's off the customer's plate. They're no longer trying to get that addressed. They don't have to come up with some sort of verbiage or excuse why they can't handle it right now, and it's addressed immediately. So I love that idea. But that was him saying, okay, here's a pain point that solves a problem for a tech, right? They get to get back to what they were doing. They don't have to be like, oh, I'll follow up with you later or anything like that. It's addressed, right? So finding those pain points and seeing where TimeZest can reduce that friction. I
I
absolutely
will,
loved that.
we'll say just, I recently had my own experience being on the other side of an MSP. I've been an MSP myself, and man, no one understands the importance of ticket numbers and keeping track of stuff more than I do. But as a client, that really totally went out the window. I mean, essentially, it's like trying to get some equipment order for somebody, and they're like, and there's a delay, and they're like, well, you didn't put the ticket number in the subject line. And I go, what? Like, as a customer, you just, you couldn't, it's very hard to put yourself in the mindset of this is something that I'm supposed to worry about, right? So that doesn't have much to do with scheduling, but I just an aside that I had noticed recently. Don't assume your customer will ever care about ticket numbers.
Well, the thing is their main focus is I have a problem, please fix problem. I don't care
Yeah,
how you do it, get it done, right?
yeah.
And so keeping that in mind, but also setting your team up for success, right? So I've talked to MSPs where they're like, we have a policy, they call in, they get us immediately, but then they come back a year later and they're like, this isn't sustainable. My overhead's through the roof because I keep having to hire new call center people, to answer the phones. And then we're just constantly on the phone and we can't address tickets that are coming in because we're trying, right? So I'm seeing more people kind of find that the balance in, okay, this is priority. We can try to address this now. This is a lower priority. Let's schedule this out so we can address it appropriately, right? And it may take some training on both your tech side and your customer side if you're doing that transition. Craig put in the link for the QR codes, which I think is great. There is that article actually has more than the QR codes. It has a lot of really great ideas of how to work TimeZest into your processes. Another friction point, you're sending out new hardware to a customer and you need to schedule a hardware setup call. Is the customer just getting in there and pulling things out and going through things on their own? What we had a customer submit is they put a shareable URL with a QR code on the packing slip for the new hardware. So they get it, they see it says scan this to schedule, they scan it and schedule their appointment, right? Reducing friction where there was, right? And so they know they don't have to go in and try to find the email or email in and create. this just takes care of it, and makes it flawless, right? Um, I think the QR codes is fantastic. We have them on our business cards, right? I tell people on almost every call that I'm on, I have one in my notebook that I take to conferences. So when I'm talking to someone, I don't have to mentally say, I need to follow up with this person. I say, here, schedule time with me right now. And let's talk about this next week when we are both in the office, right? So reducing that mental load of following up, and finding where those pain points are. Um,
I'd say I'd further that point just a little bit too, is
yeah,
the whole nature of following up, right? Is it can sometimes, and again, being the client has been insightful for me, but just calling someone out of the blue in their day, to as the MSP kind of feels like responsive. It feels like, well, I'm following up with them as soon as the issue is done, and I'm going to show them how it's done. But what I mean, unless your client doesn't work, right? What it often is doing just interrupts my day, right? And so it's
yeah.
like I now have to have this 15-minute phone call about this issue that I thought I was paying someone to to deal with, right? And instead of doing my work, when you follow up with somebody and give them the chance, it doesn't have to be, right? They could call in, right? But if you give them the opportunity to say, hey, let's set up a time where we can both expect to meet, it's giving them a
Hmm.
lot of respect that their day is important too. When you just call them out of the blue unexpected, you're interrupting their day. And so, always just keep that in mind. And, especially when you're communicating your team, like, hey, why are we doing this thing? It can be
Hmm.
it can be really easy to forget that point, right? You've got an issue, you've got a ticket, you got to get it done, right? So of course you're going to call and get the thing knocked out as quick as possible. If the client prefers that, sure. But make sure at the get-go of the relationship and when you do regular check-ins through account management of that relationship, ask them how they prefer to be contacted. They prefer this method of hey, let's find a mutually convenient time, or you just want me to call you whenever. And if they don't have a busy day, the calling whenever might work just fine. But if they have a busy day, you calling them might really upset them. So just something to keep in mind there. As with everything, we never say this is how you should do it every time. It should fit into your process, right?
Hmm.
But if you're not at least making it an option in most of those communications, you're probably not you're not utilizing it as well as you could.
Yeah, and I've worked with customers where they say, I have these VIP customers or these, high maintenance customers, however you want to put it, where they want to receive a link to schedule in the first response, right? So they're using the URL-based scheduling link, and putting it in the auto response that those customers receive from the PSA. So that they can just schedule right away. They don't have to wait for it to be dispatched and wait for it to be assigned. They just take control of it right then and there. So I've worked with a lot of customers where they've wanted to set that up. Um, I think it's important to kind of, while you're looking at your processes and where you can really fit TimeZest in and support it, also document that, right? So a good part of this is, um, Dan, I'll answer that in just a second. So, uh, you know,
Oh, is
thinking
that
of,
Dan Baird? Do we have Dan Baird on this? Maybe it's a different Dan B, but that'd be cool.
I totally lost my train of thought. I shouldn't read the chat while I'm
Yeah,
trying to.
don't pay attention to how you're talking.
Um, but I mean, it's important to think about, okay, where we're gonna where we're going to do this, where we're going to put it into our processes, where we see the most value for both our tech's time as well as the customer's time, build out that process and then manage to that process, right? So it's got to be something where, you recognize as a leadership role, this is important, and then this is how we're going to manage to it, and where we're going to work it in, and lay that out. The biggest failure I see is when customers bring TimeZest on, and then they say, "Hey guys, we got this cool new thing. Go check it out." And that's the end of it. Nobody logs in and keeps up with new functionality. The techs are not, followed up with, "Hey, are you using this?" They're not using any boards like Bright Gauge to manage if they're using it, right? So putting that into place, managing to it, making sure they're using their calendars. Those are all important things to kind of keep in mind. And then I am available if you guys want to do a lunch and learn with your team. I've found those to be valuable at times where they're like, hey, my team's just not using it. Let's have first, I'd like to talk with you a little bit before that, and say, okay, let's review your system and make sure you have let's do a system review. Things are set up to really support you. And then let's do a lunch and learn. And while we're in that call, you get your team's feedback, really set them up to be like, hey, we want to hear what's not working, what is working, and then I can help you make adjustments to your settings and system and processes to support that. So Craig's put in the link for that, lunch and learn. Craig, if you'll also put in the system review, I think that's important to do prior to a lunch and learn. But we want to make sure that you guys are supported in that. I think, Seth, do you have anything here before I take this question?
No, Dan's got a good question. He was essentially asking like, well, why doesn't TimeZest give us the option to scan clients' calendar availability and proactively schedule with an option to cancel, reschedule? It wouldn't be hard to read the client's calendar availability via API into the MSP's Microsoft partner account. And in theory, Dan, you're not wrong. It's actually a conversation we've been actively having. There has been some changes that have made this actually more feasible. The answer, for the most part, has been latency. Actually getting that pulled along with this other calendar information. You start to add too many calendars to the situation. Now you're essentially displaying something that takes like 15 seconds to load. And that has kind of been the traditional issue. There's a whole conversation actually around like people reselling TimeZest. We actually have gotten a surprising, it's something that's, certainly never escaped us, right? It's like, well, we're
Right.
offering this thing to MSPs resell some of the tools they use. And this is sort of a slam dunk way for MSPs to, resell a solution. It's like, it's very easy to implement. And you actually change the way your customer does business, and they're being more efficient and productive with technology. Boom, job done for MSP. So that's actually something we've been looking at more recently, and that would actually very much sort of involve us with that partner account and connecting those two things. And so that would probably be part of that journey as we're seeing it. So there is a feature request, in terms of reselling that stuff at roadmap.timezest.com that's mentioned in there. But then also this is also kind of a common request. It is, you're absolutely right. Like in theory, why most part it actually has just been usability so far.
Yeah, and I would say definitely go to the feature request page, and look for, I believe there are a feature request out there for that. So if you can find the original one, if not, go ahead and submit it, and put your comment in there. And then our product manager, he reviews those, and he'll actually reach out to you, and schedule time to talk through it if we're getting closer to building that out. So to kind of scope out the work and things like that. But it's really valuable for us to hear what you guys would like to see, and that is the perfect place to put it. I know it might seem like we're like, hey, just go put this idea over here, but it's not a black hole where good ideas go to die. We actually keep it as a log of requests that we can work from, right? So we want you to use that platform, so it doesn't get lost and forgotten about, right? It's easily categorized there. So are there any other questions or things that I can go over for you guys today? And Dan, for rescheduling, you now have, the calendar HQ. You can go in there and reassign and reschedule your appointments that have been scheduled with TimeZest. So I understand it's not looking at the customer's calendar, but it's a step in the right direction there, right? Any other questions or anything else that I can go over for you guys today? It doesn't have to do with this topic. It can be just in general about TimeZest. And anything
There,
fantastic. Thanks,
you found
Dan.
it.
Thank you.
It is Dan Baird. Hey, Dan. Good to see you, man.
Oh my goodness. So we actually have an article. I don't know if Craig put it in there. I know there's a lot of articles. I'm notorious for it, and I apologize. Um, about this overcoming team's resistance to TimeZest. So if you want to see it in document format, it's on the Help Center, um, because we really want to make sure that you guys have some thought process and tools around this. But I really encourage you to identify your pain points, identify where it's easy for it to just kind of slip into your processes, and then set that up for your team and then manage to it, right? So, but we appreciate you guys joining us today. If there's no other questions or anything, of course, we're here to help. After the webinar, you can always reach out to the yellow chat box. Craig watches that for us. And then also help@timezest.com. And then you've
And you
got
can
my
get
contact.
and you can watch a copy of this recording and all
Yeah.
other Lunch and Learns at our YouTube channel, youtube.com/TimeZest.
Yep. Yep. We've got a nice historical uh, catalog going on there. So we are doing this every month, the last Wednesday of the month. Primarily, that's our goal date. And so keep an eye on LinkedIn, as well as we'll put a banner in app about what the next topic. I believe next month. I'm still leaving this up in the air, but we'll be talking about dispatching best practices and things like that. So exciting. That's a new one coming up here. Not for April, it'll be May. Okay. All right, everyone. I think if we don't have any other questions, we'll call it and give you guys the rest of the day back.
Going
We
easy on us.
appreciate, yeah, appreciate you guys. Have a wonderful week. Bye-bye.
Easy, everybody.